I am technically a Splinterlands millionaire by collection power, not by monetary value of my assets, which is unfortunate. But I do have quite a bit of cards in the Splinterlands ecosystem, and I thought I'd walk you guys through my collection today in order to give you some insights as to why I've picked the cards I've picked, what makes up my collection, and my thought process for actually building a collection for yourself in Splinterlands in general. And so if we take a look at my power here at the top, it does say 995 instead of 1 million. I do have a rental account that I'll pull up for verification so you believe me that I am a real Splinterlands collection power millionaire. I just have a decent amount of these cards rented out currently. And I also have another account that I did in a recent video that I'll put a link to in that card up above. The premise of this video was a challenge in which I would spend $70 and try and get to silver and then give my cards away. And so if you'd like to enter that giveaway, go ahead and check that video out. There's still a week left in order for you to capitalize on that and maybe add some cards to your Splinterlands collection, get you started. But I'm going to go over the bulk of my collection today just to give you some insights. Now, most of what I have here is going to be modern only. I typically play in the modern league, and I don't even own a whole lot of the older series of cards. I came into Splinterlands in July of 2021, and so Untamed was pretty well winding down. Chaos Legion hadn't quite been released yet, but I did acquire some of the dice cards and some of the Untamed cards to kind of start my journey, and then heavily invested into the Chaos Legion set in order to try and build up this powerful collection using all of these new cards. And I tend to want to play more in that modern space because I didn't own a whole lot of the old cards to begin with, and it seems like they are already kind of being phased out in terms of power creep. And so while Wild is something that I can compete in with my current deck, those cards that are from the alpha, beta, and some of the promos you can't really use anymore in the modern format. They've been taken out of the game. By buying cards that are applicable to the modern format, that leaves my options open so I can continue playing in whichever format I choose. Now, currently that format is modern, and it seems like less people do play that, so I get better payouts. But they are tracked separately, and that's something to be aware of. You could strategize just by buying some of the older alpha and beta cards and trying to play in Wild. Now, I do play at the high diamond, low champion level. You definitely don't need a collection this size in order to compete there. I do find that it makes it a lot easier because I have a lot more options. Most of the cards that I try to go for are either the max level or close to it, depending on when their abilities break and certain instances that might make it less attractive for me to take them to max level if they only gain a little bit for the investment that I have to put in order to get there. Balancing when you're going to take a card to the next level is a skill in and of itself that you should definitely get acquainted with, because it may not always make sense for you to take a card from level 6 to level 8, for example, if they're only going to get an extra point of health and an extra point of speed. If that's going to cost you $200 to do, it may not necessarily be worth it for your budget, and it may not even provide you a competitive advantage. So definitely know when to hold them as far as the levels go. But I started my journey with the Fire deck. That was the one that I thought was the most enticing to me personally, and I purchased a Yoden Zaku to kind of really give me the edge in that early stages of playing the game, because I really enjoyed it and I was having fun and I really wanted to get to the top of the leaderboards and compete. And Yoden at the time was one of the strongest summoners in the game, barring basically Byzantine Kitty, but at that time it was even stronger than the Kitty. There was definitely a big Yoden meta back then. Now, there was also Lamacron, and Lamacron did destroy me a few times, and so learning to fight around that was a bit of a challenge, but my Fire deck got me through a lot of that early game grind very effectively. I think it still holds up very well. It's kind of a different deck now. I no longer have that Yoden Zaku. I did sell him when prices were much more favorable in order to kind of recoup some of my investment in Splinterlands. Well, I wouldn't call it an investment, more highly speculative money being put into this endeavor. I would write all of this off if I were you, but I use the word investment because it's very difficult to quantify putting money into a system without calling it an investment in the language that we use. So just know that it's highly speculative, and there's a likelihood that this game could just go away and you may not make any money at all, right? So keep in mind that you could lose the money that you put into this, is all I'm trying to say. Now, I have tried to purchase some of the newer Rift Watchers cards from the most recent expansion. However, they are really pricey right now, in my opinion. I still think they're maybe a little too expensive. And so I don't have hardly any of them at max level. I've been kind of dollar cost averaging into them as time goes by in order to kind of secure a decent price. Like Mordius, I actually did win out on. I think I purchased him for about $7 a BCX, and now it's sitting right at about 9, which is great. That means I could flip it for a profit if I wanted to, based on the 5% tax that the Splinterlands store takes from purchases. But I probably won't. I mean, I do use Mordius, and I have a longer time horizon than just the immediate flipping for something for $10. You know, it's not really worth my time at this point. With a collection this size, I tend to work towards bigger goals than that. This YouTube thing is like my third job anyway, so I don't necessarily have time to be spending, you know, trolling the markets, looking for deals all of the time, or at least as much as I'd like to. But I do really like the cards in the Rift Watchers expansion. I would say that by far it's one of the best art that they've put out for an expansion, and Rebellion looks like it's going to take that bar even higher, so I'm excited to see what they can cook up. A lot of these cards are really powerful. Like Ash Mirage, I wish I would have had Ash Mirage when I had Jotun. Like this card would have been amazing. I mean, it still is, but the meta has evolved quite a bit since then. And like the Night Ghoul is really strong, like really powerful card that I'm super excited to own. I think the Queen of Crows is really cool. Thematically, I'm not sure how effective it is on the battlefield yet. Maybe we'll need some more time for the meta to kind of evolve into that. And Ra has been super cool. Obviously, there's been a ton of hype around the Coeurl Lurker for just how incredibly effective it is at dodging. And this high speed with dodge, phase, and thorns at the higher levels is a really potent combo, and it can really win you some games on its own if you're lucky enough, which is incredible. But that's the most expensive card in the entire Rift Watchers expansion, and so I've just been kind of slowly adding. So if you haven't gathered, I kind of like to go for where I see the most value for what I'm actually purchasing in order to climb the rank better, right? So I want to make sure that I am still getting as many rewards from the game as possible by playing, while ensuring that the cards might have some resale value and I'm not buying like the top for a card price. You know, I don't want to buy super duper meta cards that are like really expensive right now. I will dollar cost average into them sometimes if the reward is high enough, like if it provides like so much value for my deck, but I tend to buy the cards that are maybe a little more underappreciated, maybe haven't seen as much play yet, and so people haven't really figured out how to use them correctly. And then that way I can get some experience with them, see how I feel, and maybe they'll have use in the next meta, right? And so I've already got those cards ready to go. And then if they somehow spike in value because a card has been released that maybe increases the potential use cases for that card, then I can capitalize on that if I wish, or just use the card and be happy that it got a buff. That's the way I tend to strategize about this, and it's why my collection is so large. I probably couldn't afford a collection this size if I just went straight for all the meta cards right away, right? This allows me to better deploy the capital that I have to speculate on future metas in the market. And I also went extremely heavy into the Chaos Legion presale, which has its ups and downs. I mean, right now it's mostly a down, but I would say that the airdrops that they've given have been super cool. I mean, Dr. Blight was one of the strongest cards in the game when he came out. I'd still say he's really strong. And especially at those gold and diamond leagues where I tend to play, that one airdrop alone gave me so much value. And I did sell off, I got like 28 or something copies of Dr. Blight for my presale investment. I was like in the top 100 for people who participated in the presale. So down bad, but it's still okay. You know, I'm working out all right. And I got all these Dr. Blights. I sold all but a max level copy of him and just held on, man, for that dear life of utility. But I'm very happy, like, overall with the airdrops. Like, Conqueror Yasik is so cool and fun to play with. And so that's been really great. Yeah, obviously I wish the value of the stuff that I purchased was higher, but I really can't complain other than that. I think they delivered on what they said they were going to. And so far I've been really happy with what they've put out, and it's been fun to play with, so I can't really complain. Forgotten One is also one of those cards that I think is really cool. I do really enjoy playing with him. He will surprise some people if you're not careful. That piercing on 6 attack is really strong. And they didn't have force field in the game for a while, and so it's still pretty rare to have force field on a card. He will just tank through anything that doesn't have force field, like really quickly take them down with that retaliate too, if they're in the melee position, or if they, it's a melee only rule set. So there's a lot of use cases for that card specifically that I just like him. And Lava Launcher is one of those cards that I just think is really cool for the fluff. And since it's a reward card, it's super cheap. Everyone can pretty much get one of those. So it's a great card to have at your disposal too. Really cool in Jotun, but not everybody's going to have a Jotun. I mean, you can rent him to try him out, so that's nice at least. Yeah, Water wasn't a deck that I put a whole lot of investment into, especially initially. I would say that now my Water deck is pretty competent, and I've tried to round out this collection so that no matter what rule set comes up, I have a card in every single element that will play well with that rule set. And so I'd say my collection is very balanced. If you have a smaller collection size, you're probably going to have to strategize on which of these elements that you start with in order to make sure that you have a well-rounded deck, and the game will accommodate that. Usually at bronze and silver, there aren't too many rule sets where it will limit you to a specific element. In the higher leagues, you're going to have to really make sure you have a well-rounded collection in case there's like a time where you get a match that only fire is allowed, for example. So that will happen, and you'll have to be ready for that. So my collection now is very strong, like rounded, but it definitely didn't start out that way. And so yeah, I have a maxed Kelia. I think that Kelia is one of the best Chaos Legion summoners, really strong. Even still with the new Riftwatcher summoner, just top of the line summoner, really. Jin Oceanus, if you don't have a copy, run, don't walk. He's about to go out of print, and a very strong legendary monster. I want to stop and talk about my gold card collection. I don't have a whole lot of gold cards. The only ones that I tend to purchase are the reward cards, and that's because I don't really see the benefits of like the more rewards that you get for having gold cards really worth it, especially right now. You're just not getting a whole lot of value out of that. And I don't really play in tournaments all that often. I just don't have the time right now. I don't get benefit out of playing in those like gold only tournaments. So I just don't see a whole lot of value out of gold cards. And I just wanted to throw that out there for you guys. Maybe you are seeing some more use out of your gold cards. Let me know in the comments below if you have a big gold collection and you love it. But so far, I just haven't really been enthralled by gold. And they do tend to cost about double what you would normally spend for just a regular version of the card. And so there are some instances where a card is really cool and I like the gold card version, so I go buy it anyway. Especially if the value might be disproportionate from that 2x cost that we just talked about. I do have some gold cards, but it's definitely not my main focus in this collection. Earth is a really cool element. I very much enjoy it. And especially when they released Chaos Legion, because they had the +1 magic summoner, Obsidian, and there were all these cool new strategies that you could use that didn't really exist before. The force field with my Select Slip spawn, the Goblin Psychic with actually reducing your enemy magic and healing your front line. Just a really powerful ability set, and you can really steamroll some people in the early and even mid-late game with this deck. So Magic is really strong. It's definitely been nerfed as of recent, and it's a little off meta at this point, but Magic has always been really powerful, and the ability to ignore armor in most circumstances just cannot be overstated. It is very, very good. Yeah, I have a couple of Queen Mycelias maxed, and I love the Oaken Behemoth. Epona was one of those nice to have purchases for me. You definitely don't need Epona. But she is a very fun card to use because that 1 mana slot, there's not a whole lot of options there, and she can fit into a lot of teams and actually provide value with that strengthen. I do wish I had a higher level of her, but boy is she expensive. Life. I would say Life is my favorite deck to play. I really do enjoy it. It only starts to shine after you get through to about gold. In bronze and silver, I find Life is really struggling and has been for a long time. But once you get to those higher levels, they start to have really good synergies that unlock with those abilities that they have. And so you can really build out some cool teams in life if you're at the higher levels of play that strategize a lot differently than other teams in the game. And Grandmaster Wraith is a great example of that. He plays very differently than most summoners in the game and can actually change up the way you think about teams to the point where, you know, most people have to account for Grandmaster Wraith when they're actually thinking about making a team. It's really powerful when you can throw your enemy off their game by just having a summoner, even if you don't use him. I really like Grandmaster Wraith for that reason. But yeah, a lot of cool magic synergy in life as well, and there's some really fun cards like Evangelist and Thunderbird that are range cards, but they have some amplifications for other aspects of your team. And Bila is one of my favorite cards in life. It's just a fun card to use that stun plus life leech. It's won me very many games just on its own. Death. Death is probably my most expansive Splinter, and I really love how the synergies of Death play together. There are a lot of really powerful cards in the Death deck that act really well on their own, and then you have the Summoner that debuffs the enemy team. So if you can anticipate what the enemy team is going to bring, then Death Summoners are very powerful in that they can just nullify a lot of things that your enemy might be wanting to do. And if you can stop your enemy from doing what they want to do, then that means that you get to do what you want to do, and that's great. Death is an extremely powerful and competitive Splinter, and definitely one that you should consider. Dragon. Now, Dragon is really cool. I will definitely say that. They're also nice because you usually get to use them no matter what at the higher levels, unlike some of the Splinters where they'll get canceled for specific rule sets. Dragon usually shows up in matches. You'll still be able to play them most of the time. And what's really cool is that you get to also choose another Splinter in addition to your dragons. So there's not a whole lot of dragon cards, but you also get to play with your other cards. So it makes dragons way more fun, and you get to unlock some new potential synergies that may not have existed otherwise. And so that makes them really fun for experimentation, which I personally really enjoy about Splinterlands. I like the theory crafting and figuring out, you know, what cards might benefit my deck the most, and kind of working through to figure out some great strategies and synergies. And Dragon really lets you kind of expound on that. Yeah, Quix the Devious is a really, really strong summoner right now. Very, very worth it. I think Desert Dragon is very underappreciated in this meta, but it's a very strong card. And when it works, boy, does it kill the entire enemy team in one turn. The Carnage Titan is just one of my favorites. It's just a really cool card, and it does perform pretty admirably for me most of the time. The Dampier Infiltrator and the Twilight Basilisks are my go-to, though. They're very strong cards, and they can disrupt the enemy team quite effectively. Also, Naga Assassin is just really cool for those speed builds to give you even more speed, and the backfire ability is just so strong when you have so much speed like that. Neutrals are where it's at, though. If you have a small collection, definitely prioritize getting neutrals, because that will allow you to compete no matter what rule sets are thrown at you, and you can use them across all your different Splinters as you experiment and find play styles that you enjoy. Neutrals are very powerful because they can be used everywhere, right? That does tend to limit their stats. So they do balance the fact that you can use neutrals anywhere by kind of reducing their overall power. So that way they're not too broken when you introduce them into Splinters that are more specific. So keep that in mind. If you're trying to build a really hyper-focused competitive deck, then you might not want to prioritize neutrals as much. But if you're trying to, you know, get started in the game, build out your collection, you know, you want something well-rounded because you don't know exactly what you want yet, then neutrals are really good for that. And I use neutrals all the time at every level of competitive play. So there's definitely a home for them, even though they're slightly less powerful. Sometimes they can be even more powerful because you'll find ways to break them that maybe weren't intended, or maybe were intended and that's their intended home. We already touched on Dr. Blight. One of the best neutrals at Diamond tier. Very, very good. Spirit Hoarder is another one that is just really solid that you should consider picking up if you don't have. Coral Lurker, very strong card, can win you games on its own. I like Uraeus. It's a very cheap card, and it's very solid for what you get. I use this card all the time, and it's very strong. Still haven't gotten to play with Artemis very much, but he seems like he's going to be incredibly powerful. And I think that once this winter sale kind of comes to a conclusion, we'll see some price appreciation on him just because he'll be out of print, and maybe he'll start to rent a little bit better. We can kind of figure out if there's a good home for him in the current meta or not. The Zenith Archer and Zenith Monk are very strong cards that every deck can use. And so if you don't have a copy of those, I would definitely recommend going to pick one up. I also really love the Parasitic Growth, though. there's something cool about the card artwork. I don't know, it's just very corny, but the scavenge plus opportunity abilities on a card that costs 4 mana are really, really strong. And so it fills a lot of gaps in my decks. But yeah, that's pretty well it for my collection. I'll just scroll through real quick so you guys can get an overview once again. But it's pretty expansive, and I tell you what, I really like Splinterlands. This is my favorite blockchain based game. I invest a lot of time in it, and I've invested a lot of money in it as well. And so I like that my collection is diverse and I can try out different things whenever I get bored. You know, it makes it more exciting that way for me. But if you'd like to build out your own collection by participating in a giveaway that I'm currently running, go ahead and check out this video on screen now, and it'll show you how you can enter and win some of those cards that I was showing off earlier. But that's it for today, and I'll catch you in the next one.